Hey guys, welcome to another bikini review with Coach Adam from TeamElitePhysique.com. Today we are going to be reviewing the UK Sheru Classic. In the next coming days, we're also going to be reviewing the Tahoe Pro Show. Unfortunately, there's not pictures for that yet, but I will be doing that this week with a breakdown and preview of the Texas Pro Show, where Issa is going to battle it out with Ashlyn. That is going to be a real throwdown, so look forward to that analysis. But first, let's go ahead and jump into the UK Sheru Classic. I did a podcast earlier this year talking about the judging of the UK shows and the differences of the head judge kind of setting the tones. Did they get it right at this UK show? Absolutely. I was so happy to see who the judges picked at this show. And we're going to go ahead and break down the full top five for you this time. But Jack Sullivan, head judge, knocked it out of the park. The top two were really bikini physiques that should be along the lines of Maureen being the champion, and that's what the standard is. So let's go ahead and break it down. I am very happy with the judging there. 10 out of 10 on the judging. I think they got the winner right. Second place was right. It was just a perfect showing for that judge there. So congrats on the judging, all the panel there. They really stepped up. A lot of the times I've been hearing from the UK, they're like, well, we have to get so muscular, we have to get so lean over in the UK. It doesn't appeal to the American market. Once our girls win, they go over to the American market and they don't do as well because we have to be this certain way to win over here. And then when we get over there, we don't do good because we look so different. And so I've been hearing a lot of frustration from the competitors, both in the amateur and in the pro levels. And if they are having Jack over there as a judge, you guys do not need to worry at all. He knocked it out of the park. That is a concern of the past. It seems that they have really nailed it. I mean, the reason I think he did so good is not that he picked the right winner, but it's that he could have picked the wrong winner. They could have picked a girl who was overly muscular, could have picked a girl who was overly lean. That option was there, and there were some impressive lean muscular girls there that physique-wise, yes, they are better than the winner physique-wise in terms of overall physique, but they're not better for a bikini, and that's when you know a judge is doing good. Easy to pick the best physique in the show. If she lines up with bikini, great, but it's hard to pick the best bikini physique in the show when it's not the best physique in the show, and he did absolutely that. Knocked it out of the park. I was so impressed with the judging. I can't emphasize that enough. So let's go ahead and jump into it, starting at number 5, Stein Hansen. So 5th place, Stein Hansen here. Really good physique. Now this is also what I liked about this judging is there's some pretty decent names in this show. There's some reputable names, and sometimes you'll see judges get lost in the names. You know, a big name will come in and they kind of, I don't know if they feel the pressure where they automatically kind of give them a first call out, or they're like, okay, let's put that girl towards the top because she's been doing really well lately. And if she's a little bit off, she might slip to like second or third, but she's in that first call out, and you're like, oh, she doesn't seem like she should be in the first call out this time. Stein is a name where you would say, hey, she is a top contender at this show, arguably one of the bigger names who's done really well, very consistent in that, top 5 competing overseas. And so seeing her in this list at 5th place, I was like, man, she must have been a little bit off to be in that fifth spot. Looking at her from the front, really not off at all. You can look at the lines of Stein are really good. There's a couple key areas that can really help her get to the next level, and I could see her physique doing it in a relatively short amount of time to really complete this package. But the main thing I see with her is she's pushing really hard in this front pose, so she's arching her back a lot in this front pose, which is stretching the glutes and causing this little divot here of this like flatter area of upper glute where it looks a little bit gapped. And you can see that in the back pose too, where she's really pushing hard and she's getting a lot of stretch to that glute, and she's not getting the full roundness and fullness of that upper outer edge of the glute, both in the front pose and in that back pose. Now, it does look very impressive because her glutes, the shoulder to waist to glute ratio is off the charts, but she's doing it at the sacrifice of stretching her upper glute where she's not getting the full shape of the glute. So you got to find that balance. So how hard do I push? Where do I start getting that stretch? Where am my upper glute's losing its fullness? And I think she's just a little bit too far in that. She does need a little bit more upper glute as well to finish out her physique and kind of reach its full potential. She also needs a little bit more in that tie-in to get just a little bit farther in the ranks. And these days in those tie-ins are really crispy, which means not necessarily just conditioning, but also size. You need to have a big muscle for it to show. And she just needs a little bit more development on that upper outer edge of the glute, a little less hard in the posing, a little bit more in the tie-ins. The hamstrings are nice and round. Everything looks really good. And I do think on the conditioning on the backside can be a little bit tighter for her. Not a lot tighter, probably talking 1 or 2 pounds here total for her to hit her conditioning where it needs to be. if she fixed all those things. So really minor things, but this is enough for her to go from, which arguably could have been first place, to fifth place this show. And honestly, if she would have just done that in posing, I could see her moving up maybe 2 spots alone at this show with just the posing on that on it by itself. In fourth place, we have Naomi Cosentino. Now looking at Naomi, a couple things with her overall physique that I think could have had her going a little bit higher. Now, one of the things is going to be overall presentation. Now, one of the key things that you want to do when you're a bikini competitor is if you have the muscle and you have the width, you really want to show it. And you see her hair here, it's on both shoulders. It's just a little bit on this shoulder, but it's really on this shoulder. So she's not showing her V-taper the way that, you know, she could really show it. You know, she has a really good V-taper. Look at those lats. Crazy lats. I mean, that is a really muscular high lat. It does border on being an X-frame. Remember, in bikini you want an hourglass shape, not an X-frame. It does border on being an X-frame, so there is a way to pose that a little better and maybe have that be a little bit more reserved in the front pose. But in the back pose, she should also be showing some of it, right? Just having that medium opening to her back to show the nice hourglass shape. Again, not Xing out her frame and opening a full lat spread, but we can't see anything on her right shoulder. We can't see her lats at all. She's got great lats. Can't see those. The hair is even blocking a little bit more of her midsection down low. It's not terrible on the lower back, but I would probably have her hair a tiny bit higher so I could see that crazy small waistline that she has. Have her back showing just a little bit so we can show the shoulders and the beautiful development that she has, the great hourglass shape that she has. And then look at her overall glutes. Glutes are really, really good. They are a little bit dense. I will say it's just pushing, it's bordering on looking kind of wellnessy with those glutes. I think they should be just a tad softer. And I don't mean softer in terms of just adding a bunch of body fat. Maybe she's pushing really hard. Maybe she's just been lifting for a long time, has a lot of density, but I would soften them up just a bit and she would be really, really good from the back. So from the back, you can see all those little things from the back alone would make a huge difference. Soften up the back pose a tiny bit. You're starting to get a little bit of separation in the hamstring. Overall density on the glutes is just a little bit too much. Try not to harden up your glutes so much, whether that's posing, sitting in that pose too hard, whether it's supplements taken, maybe it's just for years of working out, whatever the case it is, you know, bring it a little bit soft. Remember, the bikini is fitness model. We're not pushing as hard as wellness glutes. You don't want that hard, full, dense wellness glute. You want a little bit of a softer glute than that in terms of the actual density of the glute. Which is rare that I'm going to say that because more times than not, girls are going to need more density, not less. But in her case, a little bit softer, a little bit less dense would be helpful to give that overall bikini look. And then on the upper body, you know, we talked about the hair off the shoulders, a little bit more hourglass shape, a little bit more of that V-taper. All those things combined, and then she moves up and she probably wins the show, right? Now, looking at her from the front pose, same thing. I think she needs be a little bit more reserved with that lat on how she's going to display that. Just tone it down just a little bit. You don't want to be the best of somewhere where it's so much better than everyone else on the stage. And I guarantee she has the best lats that day on stage. Those are some amazing lats, by the way. Now, overall, everything else on her overall look, hair, makeup is good. Make sure, one little thing that you want to make sure of is that your suit is always covering. You might have a little bit of like the bottom of your chest showing. Make sure that that suit's really tight under there, so even in your pose, you're not showing anything on the bottom or too much on the sides. Just be careful with that. And then looking at her core, she's got a really good core. It's a really flat core. I would like to see a tiny bit of detail. I don't want to see full turtle shell abs, but I want to see just a kiss of detail on those abs. That's something that they're probably not going to mention to her, but I do think it would help her overall physique just a hair. And then everywhere else from the front, she's really good. So I would tone down the posing on the lat. Everything else looks really, really good from the front. So it's really just the backside, tiny fixes for her to move up the ranks. And I think that she could have won this show actually with where her physique is if she just fixed those little things. She would have been very competitive at this show. And moving into third place, we have Christina Bauer. Now, looking at Christina just from the back pose versus fourth place, you would say, well, fourth place is actually a lot better in the glutes. They're fuller, they're more dense, right? They're more detailed. But remember, this is bikini. We don't want to go over the top with things. And that's how you could see the best physique in the show actually might have been fourth place, but it's not the best bikini physique in the show. And that's where things get difficult with bikini. Is like, okay, where do I stop? Those glutes were getting to looking a little wellnessy with the density, and that's where you want to stop. You want to stop right before that, right? You want to stop where it gets to the limit of bikini, and that's why someone with less glutes or less impressive glutes is going to be beating her, right? A lot of people are going to be confused by that because if you're just looking at it based on the physique alone, You're like, well, this girl's physique is better than her. Well, I'm not going to argue with that. Her physique is better. Fourth place's physique is probably the best in the whole show. Great lats, great glutes, crazy lines, density's there, everything's awesome, but it's not the best bikini physique in the show. And that's why I'm so happy with Jack's judging here, because he was able to identify it, and it wasn't an easy identifier. You know, you throw a women's bodybuilder in the bikini lineup, it's easy to identify that's too much muscle. But when it's barely too much muscle, that's when you're seeing some high-level judging happening. That's why I'm like, okay, this is the guy you guys need to be calling back here, because he is consistent. This is what the athletes want out there. You know, Two Bros Pro, you guys knocked it out of the park with bringing in the right judges. You've been listening to the athletes, because the athletes have been saying, hey, I'm frustrated with the judging out here. I don't want to go to America and spend $2,000 to get to America just to get in front of the judge, when they should all be judging the same way. Like, why is it so hard, right? Why are they always picking the most muscular, leanest girls that look like figure competitors in bikini, and then those girls go to the U.S. and they get worked, right? So I'm really happy that they picked the right judge, and you guys in the UK, this is, you know, hopefully they continue with this. Ask for Jack. He knocks it out of the park. Doesn't necessarily need to be just Sandy or Tyler. Like, this guy knocked it out of the park. Hats off to him, because this was a tough show to pick at a pro level, and not picking the better physique is hard to do as a judge. It's like you have to really trust that you're picking the right bikini physique. So from third place up, it's a totally different physique, and I do agree, fifth place is more bikini than fourth place, but fifth place was not in condition that day. So what do? Do you err on the side of someone who is less conditioned, or do you err on the side of someone who is maybe overly conditioned and a little bit overly muscular? That's kind of judge dependent, but it's not like you're trading for a first place, so it doesn't really matter as much. And there's an argument for either one. I'm always the arguer of, I'd rather go with the more muscular girl, because it's harder to do than come in softer. That's I always kind of think about it. When I have to pick between is someone too soft or someone too hard or too muscular, I'm going to go with, well, what's harder to do, and I'll kind of go with that. But it's not going to be first place either way, so it doesn't matter as much. But that's kind of how I decided. But other judges sometimes will go softer if someone went too far. So it's just kind of up to the judge. But totally agree with that too. Now, looking at Christina, as we talked about, a little bit smaller in the glutes. She could use a little bit more roundness to her glute. Now, does look like there's a tiny bit of symmetry between the left and right glute that she can help balance out on that upper outer edge. The left, it could just be how she's maybe positioned, or maybe she's just putting more weight on the left side right now. But looking at the left glute, it looks a little bit fuller on the upper outer edge than the right. And so just some detail on getting those glutes evenly distributed. But really, really good glutes in the tie-ins. I don't think she needs any more tie-in. I think that is where it needs to be. The density is really good as well. The hamstrings are nice and round without being and no vertical separation. So I'm really happy with the detail of the hamstrings. Looking at the quads, they are getting a little bit dense. You're seeing that striation of that front quad. It's not terrible. It's not too much, but it is right on the border. Some judges are going to say that's too much. Some are going to say that's acceptable because it's barely there. I think that it's still fair for her to be in third place, because if you look at her overall conditioning up top, she still doesn't look crazy hard. She looks a lot harder on her lower body than she does on her upper body, actually. Her upper body looks very bikini condition, where it's still hard, but it's kind of has that little kiss of softness to it. And her lower body looks really dense and hard. So it's kind of, I think she has just body fat distribution a little bit different between the two when she gets to that stage level lean. It could be she might have needed to fill out a little bit more up top still. Who knows? But everyone's going to have their own unique situation with that. But to me, that's what it looks like. Now, her overall posing is pretty solid. I would like to see the shoulders show a little bit more width. I would like her to fully be over in that pose. Her waistline is really profile, which I'm not sure if it helps her. I would actually open up her waistline a little bit more, because it's so small from that full profile, and you're sacrificing some shoulders, so it doesn't need to be that small, and you're also sacrificing some shoulder width in doing that. So I'd open everything up just 1 to 2 inches, push those shoulders over just a little bit more, push that waistline over maybe an inch more, and that's going to help balance you out from upper to lower body too, because she's so developed in her legs and glutes. When your waist is this profile, it looks really small, and it actually looks, because she's not a lot of detail in that core, it looks a little bit skinny, right? There's a difference between looking lean and looking skinny. When you get really ratios that crazy, it tends to look a little bit skinny when you're starting to see some ribs pop and whatnot too. So that's the only thing I would recommend for her, to come in with that more lean looking look, versus that just in this area here, because it's so tiny, it looks a tiny bit skinny, right? So something to be careful about, and one small posing adjustment would fix all that, no problem. Yeah, but other than that, really good look. Presentation was good. Hair, makeup, tan, all that was good. And I think that with some minor tweaks, fixing that asymmetry on her glutes there, which would take a very short amount of time to do, I think that she'll be a top contender within 6 months time. And now we have the battle for first, Octavia versus Lisa. I want to go into both their front comparisons and compare them side by side, and their back comparisons, and go over why I think it is that Octavia won. And so let's go ahead and jump into it. So looking at Octavia, really good overall detail, great roundness to her shoulders on her front arm and also on her back arms. You're seeing that nice roundness now, as well as Lisa on her back arm, great shoulders too. Now, when we look at that front arm, going into that front arm position, Lisa has great shoulders, but she's not showing them their best because she's sticking her arm too far out. When you stick your arm out, you're not going to show the capping as much versus when it's at its side. So it looks a little bit better on Octavia here in that front pose. And also the judges are going to notice this arm being sticking out a little bit. They don't prefer that arm being sticking out. They want it to be more relaxed at your side. She's doing a great job showing that roundness to her shoulders, looking like a relaxed pose. Obviously, there's no bikini competitor on stage who's fully relaxed, but she looks like she's just casually standing there, and that's what bikini is supposed to look like. It looks like you just kind of woke up and went to the beach that day. That's what bikini is supposed to look like, right? She's just standing there. While you see Lisa over there, she's kind of putting a lot of push on her arm. She's sitting into her front pose a lot heavier. It doesn't look as natural bikini, right? It looks like she's really flexing up there. So that would be kind of the obvious thing from the front, from like a judge's perspective of, she's sitting really hard into her hips. She's got a slight bend to her knee here to get the hamstring to be a little rounder, but she doesn't need to. She already has more roundness. Lisa has more roundness to her hamstring than Octavia. So she doesn't need to enhance that anymore when she's competing against her for that first place here. So I think that if she would have done better, if she relaxed her arm a little bit closer at her side, if she stood directly straight up, and if she didn't push so hard and sit so hard in that front pose, because she's got crazy glutes, she doesn't need to sit so hard in that front pose. It's better for her to get that height than to sit so hard in that back pose. Because when you sit in that back pose or in that front pose, you're going to shrink up your torso height a little bit too, and it's going to change your ratios where it makes you look a little bit longer in the legs than it does in the upper body. So as far as the front shoulder, as far as the posing goes, I'm going to have to give this to Octavia. So great job on the judges. Now, as far as the conditioning goes between the two, I will say that Lisa here is just, she's not soft, but she looks a little bit softer in the core, and Octavia looks perfect bikini conditioning where it's that nice hint of body fat. There's just the tiniest bit of body fat on her. It's still bikini looking, right? We're talking about a girl in a bikini on a beach, just fitness model look. Octavia looks like that, but obviously in bodybuilding we push it to the extreme. This is a perfect bikini level of conditioning where it looks healthy and maintainable. We know it's not healthy or maintainable, but it looks healthy and maintainable, and it gives that good fitness model look, right? Not overly detailed, not overly grainy. She's got that pretty muscle where there's not too conditioned on her legs. You're not seeing the density of her legs, though there is conditioning. There's good muscle tone to it. So yeah, from the front, Octavia wins pretty much perfect score here, and I'd have it that way too. Looking at the overall presentation on both of them, I think that they both did a very good job in terms of their hair, their makeup, their suit tan, the suit and whatnot. I think that Octavia could maybe use a little bit of a bigger top. That would be kind of my only critique from the front. But all in all, pretty much knocked it out of the park. Now let's jump into the back pose, Octavia versus Lisa for that first place. Now the back pose, I'll say, is a little bit closer than the front pose. Now, looking at them from the back, one of the things, first we want to go into overall presentation. One thing I think that would help Lisa is to have hair that contrasts a little bit better. When you look at the back pose and you see Octavia's black hair versus Lisa's kind of dirty blonde hair, it looks really close to the color of the tan, and it looks a little bit monochromatic. There's not as much pop to it. So I would add just a little bit of either go a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, maybe add some highlights, whatever it takes to create some contrast with the hair in this back pose. Because you can see very close tones to the tan here versus Octavia. When you look at that pop and that standout, that black hair really pops on her. So I think she knocked it out of the park there. But where a little bit of the ball she dropped is this hair is actually running on top of the glutes a little bit, and it's hiding her lower back. So one thing I would say is shorten up that lower hair. It should never be touching your glutes. If you have long, pretty hair and you're resistant to cutting it, You know, maybe try some more curls in your hair that day to help shorten it up. But if it's still laying on top of your glutes, you're going to want to cut that because it's going to hide your lower back. It's going to make your glutes look less 3D. And that's the problem you run into when you have this long hair. But in her scenario, luckily the hair is very tapered and it comes down, so you can still see her lower back and her lines of her lower back, which is really the thing you're trying to see. It's just a little too long. So if you just cut it just about here, we'd be okay. Maybe a tiny bit taller than that, we'd be okay there. Now, looking at them from the backside, there's not a huge separating factor on the glutes between the two of them. You have a little bit more density to the glutes on Octavia here, but not a significant margin of density difference. In terms of the conditioning, it's also very similar from the back pose. Both have good tie-ins, but nothing crazy, right? That's the thing. If you look at fourth place again and you compare their glutes, you could see the difference visually of why I'm so happy with the judging here. So let's go ahead and look at the difference of what I'm talking about in terms of the overall density and hardness. Now, when we look at the glutes, and you can see how far the glutes come out as their development on that outer edge of the glute, right? You can see this area here, there's more width to them, there's more development. You're starting to get what we call the squared glutes, right? Where you're getting the full development even here where they're really squaring out and you're getting that pop out edge. And if you see here on Lisa and on Octavia, they both don't have that squared edge to their glutes. So that's where the glutes are getting a little bit big, but they're also just visually look at the density and the hardness of those glutes versus Octavia and Lisa. And that's where it becomes a little bit past the bikini division. And that's why I thought this judging was so good, because it's easy to get lost in something like this. Where you're looking at glutes like this, it's easy to be like, oh, those are the best glutes as a judge. It's hard to say, those are clearly the best glutes, but they're not bikini glutes. Like, it's really hard to do, especially when it's this close, because they're not way far away from bikini. It's not like they're pure wellness glutes. They're just a little bit past the bikini criteria. So for Jack to identify this, to put her in fourth place when everything else looks so good at the same time, when her lat was that impressive too, and he's like, just a bit too much, and being dead on about it, I mean, that is some high level judging stuff there. So really, really happy with it. Another shout out to him on that, and I'm not like friends where I'm like, just this is my boy and I'm taking care of her or anything like that. This is just good judging. Where there was bad judging and it was my friend, I'd say the same thing. So this is great judging. So look at the density difference. Look at how deep that tie-in is. Look at the hamstring kind of separation she has here on that detail versus Octavia, right? That's why, though, if you looked at these two pictures side by side, first versus fourth, and you said, okay, who's got a better physique? Pretty much 100% of the time, you'd see everyone say fourth place has the best physique. And I'm not going to argue that. She does have the best physique, but it's not the best bikini physique, right? And if you went to, 50 judges in the, if you're like NPC, IFBB judges, or maybe lower level entry kind of starting off judges, a lot of them would get confused by this and say that's the best physique here, right? And that's why I'm saying this is some high level judging. Really, really happy with what happened over there. If you're a promoter at Two Bros Pros, bring Jack back. The women want it. They want good judging over there in the UK. So anyway, with that, guys, that's what I got for you. I do have some news for you all in the UK. You might be seeing this guy out there pretty soon. Some news will be dropping on that for a bikini workshop out in the UK. Not 100% I'll get too excited, but it's looking like it's going to happen. I'm excited for it. I'm going to be all over the world this year. Towards the end of next year, I think I'll be in a couple different places, which I'll be announcing on the podcast. But it looks like 4 different countries outside of the U.S., so look for that. I guess I'm going on a little bit of a tour or something. It'll be a fun time. I'm excited to do it. Anyway, with that, guys, TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide online contest prep with me. Other than that, look for me this week. We're going to be dropping a couple more videos. Thanks so much for tuning in.